begin our session titled 1919 Jallianwala Bagh and the Century That Followed. I would request you to put your mobile phones on silence mode. Okay. And we'll have a question-answer session for 20 minutes at the end of the discussion. Our moderator for today's session is Aliya Iqbal-Naqvi, a member of the History Faculty, Department of Social Sciences and Liberal Arts, Institute of Business Administration, Karachi. She also supervises a senior thesis research program. A former head of the Liberal Arts program, Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture, Karachi, Aliya holds a BA and 2 MA degrees from Harvard University and is in the process of completing her PhD from the same institution in the field of Indo-Muslim civilizations. She also works in the social sector and is a founding member of the Karachi Conference Foundation. She is the director on the board of Green Star Social Marketing and serves as a trustee of the Nasra School Education Trust. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I think your screen is showing something else, but perhaps you can put up the bios of our speakers. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for being here today. It's 2019 and we are commemorating 100 years passing after the infamous incident of Jallianwala Bagh under colonial rule in 1919. Joining us today in our conversation on Jallianwala Bagh is Professor Ali Raza, who teaches history at LUMS in Lahore, and clearly moves around with a fan club. Ali Raza's book is about to be published soon. It's called Revolutionary Pasts, Communist Internationalism in Colonial India. अच्छा, अली रज़ा साहब के साथ बैठे हैं अली उस्मान क़ासमी साहब, also Faculty of History, LUMS. He's the author of several books, questioning the authority of the past, the Ahl al-Quran movement in the Punjab, also the Ahmadis and the politics of religious exclusion in Pakistan, and recently he edited a volume titled Muslims Against the Muslim League, Critiques of the Idea of Pakistan. आप सबको भी शायद वही ताज्जुब हो रहा होगा जो मुझे होता है कि ये अभी तक चलते फिरते कैसे नजर आते हैं. And finally, we have Haris Khalique, who needs no introduction. Haris, you're probably the only poet who from Pakistan, published poet who writes in English and Urdu. Huh? Huh? Yeah? Okay, well, it's quite unique. Haris has 9 published volumes of poetry, 2 volumes of non-fiction. He's an essayist and a columnist, and his work has been translated in many languages. So, the first question, of course, that we all want to think about and begin with today is why? Why is it important to continue to think about and remember an incident like Jallianwala Bagh massacre? What is the legacy of this incident? Is it just a painful episode in our past, or is it something that we continue to live with in our present? Ali Raza, can I ask you to respond to that first? What is the legacy of Jallianwala Bagh?
Thank you for that. I have a long-winded answer to this one. I'll try to keep it short. I hope all of us are aware of the details of Jallianwala Bagh. For those who are unaware, 13th of April 1919, there's a small crowd gathered, well, a fairly large crowd, gathered in Jallianwala Bagh, and they're there to protest the detention of 2 leaders of the Indian National Congress, who in turn had been detained because they were participating, or leading rather, what became to be known as the Rowlatt agitation. It was a massive agitation against the imperial government of the time, And what followed after is a detail that I hope all of us know. Roughly more than 1,000 people are killed after orders were issued by General Dyer to his native troops to open fire on a civilian unarmed crowd, composed of men, women, and children, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. And so to go back to this question of legacy, I have to be honest. I think this is a very important year, but I'm also wary of anniversaries. I'm also wary of commemorations, and I'm wary of commemorations and anniversaries because I think that Jallianwala Bagh has somewhat now is seen as somewhat of an exception to what was otherwise the everyday violence of a colonial regime. And I say this keeping in mind the demands that were issued, rightly so, for apologies to be issued by the British government, which are still in some ways pending. There has been no official apology as yet. But again, I express my reservation when it comes to the politics of apologies and commemorations, precisely because, as I said, it elevates what was otherwise a norm into an exception. In other words, Jallianwala Bagh was not an exceptional event. It certainly was exceptional in terms of its magnitude, in terms of the fact that 1,000 civilians are killed on a single day. But otherwise, one can think of Jallianwala Bagh as merely being a symptom, an illustrative example of the reality of empire generally. In other words, violence or Jallianwala Bagh is not an aberration of empire. Jallianwala Bagh is empire. And so colonialism in some ways is nothing but, or was nothing but, a rule by violence. And so when we are reflecting on the legacy of Jallianwala Bagh, it's obviously important not just to honor the memory of those who were killed, but also to think carefully about just what is it that continues to proliferate in the present. How does Jallianwala Bagh and the logic that led to Jallianwala Bagh, how is it still around us in our everyday? When it comes to thinking about state violence, when it comes to thinking about police violence, violence by the military, and so on, it's still very much a part of our everyday. I think that's what I will end with.
Thank you, Ali. You briefly made a reference to the Rowlatt Act. This was the Kala Qanoon that the British colonial government had introduced quite recently into colonial India. It is the legalization of emergency measures, something that we are very familiar with in today's world, where people can be arrested and incarcerated without reason or trial. And this act, this Kala Qanoon, is what people were gathering to protest against. Qasmi Saab, would you like to take it next, or Haris, would you like to continue talking about the legacy?
Yeah. Building on what Aliya said as to like the centrality of violence to the very idea of empire, and that it's not like the projection is as if it was an isolated event, and this is how British historians generally have tried to portray it, and to argue as if otherwise, the British rule was largely benevolent. And even in comparison with other forms of colonial rule, whether French colonialism or Belgian colonialism, like Belgian violence in Congo, as if that was something different, but what the British Empire stood for was not best reflected in what happened in Jallianwala. I want to talk about the legacy of it and the memory of Jallianwala Bagh as to how it's been commemorated, and not just Jallianwala but other such instances as well. For example, the War of Independence of 1857, as to what kind of politics of commemoration has been there. In case of Pakistan, the problem is that Pakistan does not really have that historical narrative where anti-colonialism can be accommodated. The overall thrust of Pakistan historiography is generally anti-Hindu. It's not liberation from the British colonial rule. It's kind of imagined kind of liberation from a possible Hindu domination that is at the heart of Pakistani nationalist historiography. That is why, and it's not to say as if there were not groups, people, individuals who were actively participating against the British rule, who later on, were living in Pakistan. But there is an expressed kind of distancing that the Pakistani state has in fact incarcerated those who were, who could be identified as belonging to anti-colonial, that sort of politics. And since they were anti-colonial during the British period, they were opposed to Pakistan as well, and that is why post 47 as well, they were looked upon in suspicious terms. And you find this tendency, for example, if I pick up the centenary of 1857, which happened in 1957, so it was a huge event in case of India. Numerous publications came out as compared to Pakistan, where I think just a couple of Khayal published a special issue, Intezar Hussain Sahab and a couple of other people. But generally, it's not really part of the mainstream discussion or academic discussion or stuff like that. And I also want to point out the anxiety of the empire, which continues to, which continues even today when it comes to the memory of such events. Yeah. Even in 1957, the British were extremely anxious about all these planned activities which Nehru was doing in case of India, and they were watching people who were coming to the British Library looking for records and who were trying to write histories of 1857 revolt. They wanted to make sure that nothing happens as such which becomes problematic for India, for British relations with India. And when it comes to Jallianwala Bagh centenary, we organized, Ali Raza and I, we organized an event at LUMS this year. And we wanted to make it into a larger sort of a project about colonial violence generally. And we wanted to talk about Palestine, we want to talk about Congo, Algeria, New Zealand, Australia. For that, we thought, we should try to get some funds. And it turned out that there was no official kind of support. They were not, forget about support. The British High Commission, the British Council, the French Embassy, who like all of them proudly support events like Islamabad Literature Festival or Karachi Literature Festival, and rightly so, they were not interested. They did not even respond. They did not even want to acknowledge that they have a role to play and that they should be supporting an event that tries to remember the memory of colonial violence in this region. So that, I think, tells you a lot about the importance of remembrance. There are ways of remembrance which should be done in a manner that does not allow for its appropriation in a in a manner that that does not gel with the politics of the event itself or the anti-colonial or radical thirst of it. But nonetheless, it is important that the memory of it is kept alive. It's just that the politics of it has to be decided in an appropriate manner.
Thank you, Qasmi Saab. As you were talking, I was thinking that one of the problems that both India and Pakistan have with keeping the memory of the anti-colonial struggle alive is that so many of these key moments, whether it's 1857 or Jallianwala Bagh and the protests against the Rowlatt Act, these are all moments in South Asian history when people banded together despite and above communal divides. And that, I think, is a big problematic in how we can or can't recall these incidents. But Haris, over to you.
Thank you, Aliya. You see, what concerns me, rather bothers me, is the continuity of the colonial rule in South Asia. And I'll be very candid. It's Pakistan actually can be seen as the successor state of the Raj. Perhaps civilizationally, culturally, in other ways, India, but India is also continues to be the successor state. But in terms of crass colonial institutions and the existence of and the continuity that Ali Usman Qasmi has also referred to, you see, and for the sake of convenience, of course, it's far more complicated and complex. but there are what we inherited, the permanent institutions of the state in Pakistan, what we inherited, whether it is the judiciary or the military or the bureaucracy, are colonial institutions, and they are perpetually at odds with institutions formed by the people of Pakistan or people in this region. And those institutions are political parties, press, independent press, citizens' organizations. So you see that tussle, that conflict, that contradiction, and the use of violence, and the use of, you have just recently seen FATA being merged into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but at the same time you see that an ordinance where you can use the military in aid of civil power being extended to the whole of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So I think, the way it is about the mindset. So I call it, and at the cost of repeating myself, I always call it the brown Raj. So the Raj actually shifts. Just the faces change, and the same, a new elite actually has developed, but on the same lines. And this is what is more bothersome, and this is something that we need to challenge continuously. When you look at Jallianwala Bagh, we are also celebrating. we are commemorating the actual, the tragedy and the event, which according to according to the natives, it's more than 1,000, 1,200, which includes children who were as young as 10 or 12 years old. But I think the official figures are 300, 350 people.
Yes, 300.
No, but many died of
Later.
unattended wounds that night.
Yes, absolutely. So the resistance also continues somehow in the same fashion, and Jallianwala Bagh not just defines the way colonial powers work, it also somehow continues to define the resistance that we see in South Asia. And so you see people gathering, you see there is a certain way people do public rallies and political processions in this part of the world, which is comparable but not entirely similar to what we see in other parts of the world, as it were. And there's something that also, there's the collaborators. For instance, Ali Raza said that, the general ordered his native troops to open fire. So you find the same happening here. So you find collaborators in the same way, working for the masters, the elites that rule, and the elite institutions that rule, and the class that those institutions represent or safeguard. So this continues to happen. So I think these 100 years, what we need to perhaps think about collectively as a nation, as people, is that how do we actually stop Jallianwala Bagh from happening regularly on a daily basis in our lives. And that is something that makes Jallianwala Bagh very significant for us. And of course, as Ali Raza said, and I finish here, that it is not one single event. It is our history for the past hundreds of years, and it should stop. It should actually, we should live differently, more decently, and with equal citizenship and rule of law, where laws are made which are pro people.
Haris, as you were speaking, of course, I don't think any of us can deny that the army is the most palpable and obvious colonial institution that we still live with. Yesterday in his talk, Muhammad Hanif made this remark that there are 130 English words that are part of the special vocabulary of the armed forces, and whatever you want to express, whether it is the depths of feeling, the nuances of culture, anything you want to tell, an armed forces person has to be said using those 130 words. And I was thinking of that when earlier today I came across a transcript of a speech made by General Dyer to the people of Amritsar following the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and the protests that had led up to it. They shut the city down basically after that. You people know well that I am a sepoy and a soldier. Do you want war or peace? If you wish for a war, the government is prepared for it. And if you want peace, then obey my orders and open all your shops, else I will shoot. For me, the battlefield of France or Amritsar is the same. For me, the battlefield of France or Amritsar is the same. Of course, World War I has just ended. I am a military man and I will go straight. Neither shall I move to the right nor to the left. Speak up if you want war. In case there is to be peace, my order is to open all shops at once. You people talk against the government, and persons educated in Germany and Bengal talk sedition. I shall report all these. Obey my orders. I do not wish to have anything else. I have served in the military for over 30 years. I understand the Indian sepoy and Sikh people very well. You will have to obey my orders and observe peace. Otherwise, the shops will be opened by force and rifles. You will have to report to me of the Badmash. I will shoot them. Obey my orders and open shops. Speak up if you want war. You have committed a bad act in killing the English. The revenge will be taken upon you and upon your children. He actually said that.
And the fact that, you know, there was a effort to raise money to support General Dyer after he was dismissed from service, which raised about £26,000, including £10 contributed by Rudyard Kipling, to make sure that he can live in peace after retirement. I thought.
Actually, Qasmi Saab, I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about the topic that you raised, the question that you raised about the politics of commemoration and the ways in which we ought to engage with history.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I want to say is, or what I'm trying to argue is that there are so many statues built or memorials built for Bhagat Singh, let's say, in case of India. And there's a general argument being made that there is none in case of Pakistan. But my concern is that you still have Bhagat Singh's statues all over India. But the politics which should be informing the kind of memory of Bhagat Singh, what Bhagat Singh stood for, is largely, is receding. Which means that Bhagat Singh, everyone can make claim to the memory of Bhagat Singh. That's one of our friends, Chris Muford, has written a fantastic book about that. The afterlives of Bhagat Singh, the way his legacy can be, or has been, or is being appropriated. So for Hindutva as well, Bhagat Singh now is a hero. That he is the ideal young Indian patriot that everyone needs to follow, right? So, and this is happening because, like I said, the kind of politics that should be informing the memory or legacy of Bhagat Singh is declining, So, for that kind of memory to be effective, to play an effective role in larger public sphere, it's important that it's connected with the kind of radical politics that Bhagat Singh stood for. And the same, I think, holds true for Bhagat Singh. Otherwise, for Jallianwala Bagh. Otherwise, I believe that now, perhaps, the Pakistani state may not feel that much concerned erecting a statue of Bhagat Singh in Lahore or somewhere else, because it may not lead to the kind of radical politics that he stands for, right? So that's what I meant when I was talking about the commemorative politics.
And even if I can add a word to that, I mean, it's striking to note what exactly is being commemorated, at least in Pakistan. A statue of Ranjit Singh was recently unveiled in the Lahore fort. Haris, कुछ कहना चाहेंगे उसके बारे में?
But you can't name a square in Lahore after Bhagat Singh, but you can erect a statue of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. I mean, you can see the,
So it's, I mean, yeah. So ये मेरे ख्याल से बड़ी अहम बात है कि to note what is remembered and what is like conveniently expunged from our memory, so to speak. And I think what is, in Pakistan's case at least, as Qasmi was suggesting, what is conveniently expunged from nationalist myth-making, from nationalist memory, is perhaps a shared history of anti-colonial struggle. And I think that is precisely what this whole controversy around Bhagat Singh and the efforts to rename the chalk after Bhagat Singh, that's what it represents in some ways. उसके अलावा कासमी साहब कुछ और अगर आप ऐड करना चाहें.
नहीं, आई थिंक आई वुड लाइक टू sort of जो कासमी साहब ने पहले बात की थी ना, मेरे ख्याल है बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है कि you can't build a nation. This, you know, if you go back to the ये जो है इसका theme of the शुक्रिया शकील साहब, the theme is क्या कि the focus is tomorrow, reflecting on the past. So how can you actually understand your present and build a better future if you can't learn or reflect on your past? And I think there's a memory gap. एक तो खैर project erasure of memory तो है ही, लेकिन एक वो इंडिया में माशाल्लाह अब हमसे भी आगे वो फहमी दरियास की नज़्म रोज़ याद आती है कि मतलब हमारे जैसे निकले क्या, बल्कि अब तो कुछ और ही सूरत हाल है, दो कदम आगे ही बढ़ गए. लेकिन ये जितनी ये जो मेमोरी का एक पाकिस्तान में, आई थिंक वी आर मोर कंसर्न्ड अबाउट पाकिस्तान एंड वी शुड स्टॉप डिफाइनिंग आवरसेल्व्स एज नॉन इंडिया, बट एट द सेम टाइम देयर इज अ शेयर्ड हिस्ट्री and that shared history just can't be ignored. I mean, why can't we celebrate or commemorate? I continue to say celebrate because it is a milestone in our resistance movement, anti-colonial resistance movement. Jallianwala Bagh के बारे में जो है, I really it's like Bhagat Singh, Jallianwala Bagh, ये shared history है. पाकिस्तान, ये जो वाघा बॉर्डर पे लिखा हुआ है बाबे आज़ादी, हम दिल्ली से आज़ाद नहीं हुए, लंदन से आज़ाद हुए हैं. You see, that is something that we need to remember and remind ourselves that it is actually we were not freed from what is now the Union of India, and unfortunately a quasi-fascistic state that it is evolving into be. Lekin we were actually freed from the British, and I think that you do a great disservice to understanding your history. And since there is a loss of memory that जो कि हो गया है collective, तो उसकी वजह से हम ये कभी भी नहीं समझ पाते कि these events, how do these events actually inform our own politics, our own institutions, inform our understanding of, of our own institutions that govern us. And by the way, I would slightly sort of not disagree, but sort of broaden the net of criticism. I think fundamentally it is the judicial system that is the problem, not the army, police. ये सब चीज़ें तो आपको सामने बिल्कुल नज़र आती हैं ना, या जिस ब्यूरोक्रेट से आप डील कर रहे हैं, चाहे वो क्लार्क है या सेक्शन अफसर है, वो ये तो सामने नज़र आती हैं. लेकिन जो जुडिशल सिस्टम है आपका, वो इंतहाई एक एंटी पीपल कलोनियल उसकी बुनियादें हैं, जिस तरह से वो चलता है. तो आई थिंक इट्स नॉट जस्ट वन इंस्टीट्यूशन. आई मीन दैट इज इन द फेस, एंड दैट हैज बीन sort of ruling for good 35 years directly and another 20 indirectly. But otherwise it's the whole sort of the way the structure of the state is organized. I think that needs to be redefined. You cannot continue functioning as a colonial state, because उसके नतीजे में आप देख लें कि 2.5 करोड़ बच्चे स्कूलों में नहीं हैं, 50% लोग जो हैं उनके पास मुनासिब रोज़गार नहीं है, 30-35% लोग जो हैं वो खत्ते गुर्बत से नीचे हैं. Because I mean there is a reason for that, and that is how your economy and your politics is run.
And I think as Haris pointed out, कि जो legacy है, जो institutional legacy है, and the continuities of that, the logic of power remains the same. Yeah. And if you look at so we're talking about Rowlatt Act, and how sedition has been defined in the Act and gives sweeping powers, emergency powers to detain a person or trial without jury and stuff like that.
Section 144.
Section 144, yeah.
And so we have seen far more worse since then. Now, in the name of national security and anti-terrorism, there have been worse laws. There have been military codes which have been sanctioned by Parliament. And worse than that, I mean, there was still some kind of a legal framework. There is a framework which does not recognize any kind of law in which thousands of people are just picked up and kept in detention indefinitely and people don't know about them, right? So that's the logic of power that we're talking about. And the same logic of power is visible when, you know, that incident happened in case of occupied Kashmir, जहाँ पर वो जीप पर एक शख्स को बांध कर आग फिराया था और वो आई थिंक पार्था ने उस पर कहा था कि जनरल डायर का पार्था चैटर्जी wrote about it. And there's so many, I mean, right from the beginning, I mean, right after 47, like what Nehru did in, you know, in the military operation Hyderabad Deccan, and we went after communists and talk about Pakistan, then, you know, it's as recently as Har Kamar में जो वाक़या हुआ, लॉजिक क्या, लॉजिक ऑफ पावर रिमेन्स द सेम. तो वो बाज़ लोगों का एजाज़ है जो इसको साबित करते हैं और उसको जस्टिफाई करते हैं कि ये बिल्कुल इसी तरह ही होना चाहिए. इसके अलावा क्या, उसके अलावा लॉजिक क्या है कि ऐसा ना हो कि आप मिलिट्री पोस्ट के पास हो और आप पर फायर ना खोला जाए, राइट? सो दैट लॉजिक ऑफ पावर, दैट पावर कंस्टलेशन इज समथिंग व्हिच इज, as you rightly say, it's colonial state. I mean, post hum laga dete hain, but it's the logic of colonial state as a power constellation which is still existing, and that has to end, as you said. The Raj has to end.
Because you see the post-colonial, post-modern, I mean, like, ये बहुत सारी Western academia से हम we borrow our categories of analysis. Unfortunately, क्योंकि हम तो नहीं करते ना ज़्यादा काम, ये चंद लोग अब हैं, लेकिन मेरा ख्याल है ये problem है, because I still think that it is Raj.
So both of you are talking about something that I'd like to expand. Qasmi Saab, your logics of power. There is, of course, the institutions of state, whether it's the judiciary, the army, the bureaucracy. But then there are the structures and logics of, and the legacies of the cultural and intellectual violence of colonial rule, right? And the imposition of the judicial system is one of them. When it first was literally imposed upon Indians in the 18th century, it was almost unworkable because it was so alien. And then, of course, there's education. And when we're talking about how history is remembered or forgotten or used or manipulated, we inevitably are talking about the production and excision of knowledge. So I wanted you to take that and talk about it.
Thank you for the intervention. I think that's a valuable point, and I think that what you're pointing to is a reminder, actually, that for us all to conceptualize violence in far broader terms. It's very easy to think of violence as again blood, gore, and spit, and so on. Tanks, bombs, and guns, and all the rest of it. But that's what I partly meant, which was to think about colonialism as a regime that is built on violence and everyday violence that, whether it's through, again, as I said, the gun or the cannon and so on, or whether it's through simple kind of like these draconian measures. And let's not forget, and the other institutions that you pointed out, obviously. And let's not forget that the other logic that building on what Qasmi said, the logic of power, there's also a logic that is built on a deep distrust of the people as a category.
And vice versa, a deep distrust of the state and its power.
Absolutely. A deep distrust of the people, a deep distrust of civil liberties, of what we would recognize as civil liberties, the right to freely associate, the right to speak our minds, the right to do what we want and so on, well, within obviously some kind of reason and so on, and that continues to animate and perhaps link together both the post-colonial, the colonial and its allegedly post-colonial successor. I think that is also something that is worth bringing into the frame when it comes to thinking about the question of violence in a larger kind of framework.
I think it's a very important point that you see, subjects are never trusted. Citizens are trusted because they have a stake in their state. So, I mean, if people are subjects, why should they be trusted by the ruler? So I think that logic continues.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit now. several books. Of course, there are many works on the incident of Jallianwala Bagh and the surrounding history, but commemorating the centenary in 2019, amongst the books that have come out, ek to Qasmi sahab ke paas hai, and another one is an edited volume by Rakhshanda Jalil, which is several, let's look at the table of contents, about 30 pieces of fiction and poetry written by anybody you can think of from the canon of South Asian literature, engaging with this event. So perhaps Haris, I'll throw this at you first. Why did this particular incident have such a powerful impact on the imagination of Indians under colonial rule?
I think, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is the enormity of this tragedy. I mean, it's massive, and where innocent children are killed, or young children are killed, and and also, you know, it was an attempt to break the sort of, if you look at the, I mean, it is, you know, their forte. I'm not a historian. But if you look at the period between the 1912, 13, 14 to 1920, 22, there was a lot of communal harmony that we witnessed. I mean, there were movements for revival of different religions and different denominations also, but at the same time, we witnessed a kind of communal harmony developing. So this was a blow, and where you find people in Amritsar gathering from all faiths that were practiced in India, and so it does invoke a certain, you know, it's a tragedy that invokes a lot of you know, anger and sadness, and that actually captures the imagination of writers. And so you find people in languages spoken in this part of South Asia writing about Jallianwala Bagh even to this day. So I think that was the primary thing. But going back to your previous question, sorry Ali.
नहीं आप खत्म कर लीजिए.
No, going back to your previous question, the cultural and intellectual sort of you know, violence. I think that is something that distinguishes colonialism from monarchies that we had before, because it was not all hunky dory even before the British arrived. So we are not suggesting at all. We are not lamenting the fact that every, you know, the colonialism ने हमारी जिंदगियां बर्बाद कर दी. उससे पहले भी कोई यहाँ जो है वो गुलो गुलजार नहीं थे. I mean, they were all oppressive monarchies, but they were natives, and there's a difference, and that difference is the cultural and intellectual subjugation of your minds. And there's a colonial mindset that was, you know, that gets developed. So you find resistance to you know, different rulers of Indian, South Asian, Afghan, whatever, you know, origin here as well. But that distinct cultural and intellectual subjugation of people is how, you know, is what defines colonialism. So I think what art and literature does, it subverts. And it subverts power subtly, it subverts power overtly. You know, I mean, there are some people who overtly subvert it, but, you know, mostly it does it in ways where an alternative memory bank is created. In case of, you know, if you come to the partition of South Asia, you will find people like Manto and Amrita Pritam keeping those memories alive, and so many others also. But two names that, you know, that came to my mind immediately are Manto and people like Manto, who would keep those memories alive. So there is an alternative history, people's history, which in countries like ours, where history is not taught or is not discussed. I mean, as you know, as we have been saying,
right? And so
literature plays a major part in understanding and actually conserving that history and transmitting that history to next generations.
Qasmi sahab?
नहीं, he is absolutely right कि अगर तारीख़ में या उस तरह से निसाबी कुतुब में वो चीज़ नहीं पढ़ाई जा रही, लेकिन शायरी में, अफसाने में, नावल में, और वो जो बल्कि जिस किताब का आप हवाला दे रही हैं इसके अलावा उसमें भी शामिल है वो अफसाने, लेकिन ख़ास तौर पर ग़ुलाम अब्बास का अफसाना रेंगने वाले, इतना शानदार, उसको बल्कि उसका कुछ हिस्सा अगर
आप पढ़ दीजिए.
اس کی تھیم مطلب براڈلی یہی ہے کہ امرتسر میں ایک سڑک تھی جہاں پر کسی یورپین خاتون کو نیٹیوز نے تنگ کیا تھا یا اس کی توہین کی تھی, تو اس کا بدلہ لینے کے لیے یورپینز نے یہ کہا, جو وہاں پر فوجی تھا, کہ یہاں سے جو بھی ہندوستانی گزرے گا اس کو اس سڑک پر رینگ کر چلنا ہوگا, وہ رینگ کر یہ سڑک کراس کرے گا. تو اس پس منظر میں یہ افسانہ ہے غلام عباس کا. بہت ہاں
یہ the events that led up to April 13th, which is the day of the massacre, couple of days prior to that there was a protest to free two Congress leaders from Amritsar who were agitating against the Rowlatt Act. I think Satya Pal and Saifuddin Kichlu, yeah, a Hindu and a Muslim, and Kashmiri. Anyway, that was the first day that fire was opened by the troops on a peaceful protest gathering. But when fire was opened, the protesters scattered and some of them turned into an unruly mob where they went and burnt a few colonial government buildings, attacked, I think, three or four white men, and one white woman who, I think Marcella Sherwood, she was a school teacher and she was on a bicycle going home from school and was and these mobsters happened upon her. Incidentally, she was lynched but saved, rescued by the people of that neighborhood and hidden in a home. So this is about that. There's غلام عباس کی کہانی ہے رینگنے والے. It's been told from the point of view of a young boy in 6th grade, and because of all the unrest in the city, he's been locked up in his house by his mother for 2 weeks or so, and he finally, after 2 weeks, is able to escape with his best friend, and they go off to see this famous کوچا, نام بھول گئی اس کا میں, کوچا سم تھنگ, جہاں پہ یہ جنرل ڈائر نے آرڈر پاس کیا تھا کہ اس کوچے سے یا گلی سے جب بھی کوئی گزرے گا تو پیٹ پہ رینگ کے گزرے گا. ہاں, کافی دیر تک دونوں بچے یہ انتظار کرتے رہے, کچھ بھی نہیں ہوا. میں نے اتنا کہا ہی تھا کہ گھر چلو کہ سچ مچ ایک آدمی ہی آ گیا. وہ کوئی ادھیڑ عمر کا دیہاتی معلوم ہوتا تھا. کھدر کا اجلا سفید کرتا, سفید تہمد, سفید پگڑی, پاؤں میں دیسی جوتا. اس نے ہاتھ میں ایک گٹھڑی سی تھام رکھی تھی. وہ ڈرا اور سہما ہوا ان فوجیوں کے قریب پہنچا. پہلے تو اس نے ہاتھ جوڑ کر سب کو سلام کیا, پھر بڑی عاجزی سے کہا, صاحب بہادر, میں گاؤں سے آیا ہوں, میرا بھتیجا اسی گلی میں رہتا ہے, مجھے اس کے پاس جانا ہے, ایک بہت ضروری کام ہے. گورے سارجنٹ اور گورکھا سپاہیوں نے بڑے غور سے اس شخص کو دیکھا. پھر گورے نے پوچھا, کیسا کام؟ اس شخص نے پھر عاجزی سے کہا, میرا بھائی گاؤں میں سخت بیمار ہے, بچنے کی امید نہیں. میں نے اپنے بیٹے کو بلایا ہے کہ اس نے اپنے بیٹے کو بلایا ہے کہ آخری مرتبہ اپنی صورت دکھا جائے. گورا اس کی بات کچھ سمجھ گیا. ویل, تم گلی کے اندر جانا مانگتا؟ جی حضور. تو بس رینگ کر جاؤ, ہم اور کچھ نہیں سننا مانگتا. وہ شخص پہلے تو کچھ دیر خاموش کھڑا گورے سارجنٹ اور گورکھا سپاہیوں کی صورتیں تکتا رہا, مگر جب اسے ہمدردی کی کوئی جھلک نظر نہ آئی تو اس نے ناچار گٹھڑی کو اپنے پیٹ پر باندھ لیا اور زمین پر جھک کر اپنے ہاتھوں اور پاؤں کے بل چلنے لگا. یہ دیکھ کر گورا سارجنٹ فوراً اپنی کرسی سے اٹھا اور کمر سے پستول نکالی. دیہاتی کا راستہ روک کھڑا ہو گیا. ڈپٹ کر بولا, نہیں ٹھہرو, ایسا مت چلو, پیٹ کو زمین پر لگاؤ اور رینگو. یہ دیکھ کر معلوم نہیں نوشاد کا کیا حال ہوا, مگر میری آنکھوں میں تو آنسو امڈ آئے. بیچارہ دیہاتی. بے اختیار میری زبان سے نکلا, میرے دل نے چاہا کاش میرے ہاتھ میں پستول ہوتا اور میں اس لال منہ والے بندر کو وہیں ڈھیر کر دیتا۔ اس دیہاتی نے گورے کے کہنے کے مطابق پیٹ کے بل رینگنا شروع کیا۔ یہ کام اتنا مشکل تھا کہ 5 منٹ میں صرف 10 گز کا فاصلہ طے ہو سکا۔ اتنی ہی دیر میں اس کے سفید اجلے کپڑے خاک اور دھول میں اٹ گئے۔ خوش قسمتی سے وہ گھر جس میں اس کو جانا تھا گلی کے بیچ میں تھا، اس لیے اسے سارا فاصلہ طے کرنا پڑا، پھر بھی بیچارہ آدھ گھنٹے تک رینگتا رہا۔ نوشاد نے کہا، لو اب تو دیکھ لیا رینگنے کا تماشا، چلو اب گھر چلیں۔ نہ جانے کیا بات تھی کہ ابھی میرا دل وہاں سے ہلنے کو نہیں چاہتا تھا، مگر نوشاد کے اصرار پر میں چلنے کو تیار ہو گیا۔ ابھی ہم سیڑھیوں سے اترنے نہ پائے تھے کہ ہم نے دیکھا 2 نوجوان ایک دوسرے کے گلے میں باہیں ڈالے عجیب انداز سے جھومتے جھامتے چلے آ رہے ہیں۔ دونوں کے گٹھے ہوئے کثرتی بدن تھے اور لباس بھی دونوں کا ایک ہی طرح کا تھا، یعنی ململ کا کرتا اور لٹھے کا تہمد۔ دونوں سر سے ننگے تھے، انگریزی فیشن کے کٹے ہوئے بال، دونوں کی عمریں بھی ایک سی ہی تھیں، یہی کوئی 17 18 برس کی۔ وہ دونوں گورے سارجنٹ کے قریب آ کر کھڑے ہو گئے۔ ان کے سرخ و سفید چہروں پر خوف یا گھبراہٹ کا نشان تک نہ تھا۔ صاحب بہادر سلام، دونوں نے ایک ساتھ کہا۔ گورے نے آنکھ اٹھا کر دونوں کی طرف دیکھا۔ ویل تم کیا مانگتا؟ صاحب بہادر ہم رینگنا مانگتا۔ اچھا تو رینگو۔ یہ سن کر دونوں نوجوانوں نے پہلے تو اپنے اپنے کرتے اتارے، پھر بنیان اور پھر تہمد۔ دونوں نے پہلے سے جانگیے کسے ہوئے تھے، ایک کا جانگیا سرخ رنگ کا تھا اور دوسرے کا سبز رنگ کا۔ ان کے گورے گورے سڈول جسموں پر جانگیے بہت بھلے معلوم ہوتے تھے۔ چاندی کے 2 چھوٹے تعویذ کالے ڈورے میں پروئے ان کے گلے میں پڑے تھے۔ دونوں نے پہلے تو اپنے اپنے کپڑوں کے بکچے بنائے اور انہیں گورے سارجنٹ کی کرسی کے پاس ہی زمین پر رکھ دیا۔ پھر 4 5 بیٹھکیں نکالیں جیسے اکھاڑے میں اترنے سے پہلے پہلوان نکالتے ہیں۔ پھر یک بارگی یا علی کہہ کر دونوں زمین پر اوندھے منہ لیٹ گئے اور بہت تیزی کے ساتھ پیٹ کے بل گلی کے دوسرے سرے کی طرف رینگنے لگے۔ ان کے ہاتھ پاؤں اتنی تیزی سے چلتے تھے کہ وہ گزوں کا فاصلہ منٹوں سیکنڈوں میں طے کرتے جاتے تھے۔ گورا سارجنٹ اور گورکھا سپاہی ان دونوں نوجوانوں کی حرکات کو بڑی حیرانی اور دلچسپی کے ساتھ دیکھ رہے تھے۔ ابھی تک دونوں میں سے کسی نے کوئی ایسی بات نہ کی تھی جو فوجی قانون کے ذرا بھی خلاف ہوتی۔ اچھا، یہ 2 نوجوان کئی پھیرے مار کے ابھی دوسرا پھیرا کر کے وہ تیسرے پر جانے ہی والے تھے کہ گورا سارجنٹ اچھل کر ان کے سروں پر جا پہنچا۔ اس کے ہاتھ میں پستول تھا اور اس کا چہرہ غصے سے سرخ ہو رہا تھا۔ اس نے ڈانٹ کر کہا، بس بس اب اٹھو، بھاگو یہاں سے، یو ڈیم کالا آدمی۔ دونوں نوجوان رک تو گئے مگر اٹھے نہیں اور زمین پر اوندھے پڑے پڑے سوالیہ نظروں سے گورے سارجنٹ کی طرف دیکھنے لگے۔ دیکھو تم اٹھے گا نہیں تو تم ایک دم سے تم دونوں کو گولی مار دے گا۔ یہ بات ہے صاحب بہادر؟ سبز جانگیے والے نوجوان نے پوچھا۔ ہم کوئی جرم نہیں کرنا مانگتا صاحب بہادر، سرخ جانگیے والے نے کہا۔ ہم تو اپنا ریس کرنا مانگتا، تم ہم کو کیوں روکنا مانگتا؟ ہم کچھ نہیں سننا مانگتا، تم اٹھے گا نہیں تو ہم گولی مار دے گا۔ ناچار وہ دونوں نوجوان اٹھ کر کھڑے ہو گئے اور اپنے جسموں سے مٹی جھاڑنے اور کپڑے پہننے لگے جنہیں انہوں نے بکچے سے بنا کر وہیں گلی کے سرے رکھ دیا تھا۔ جب وہ کپڑے پہن چکے تو سرخ جانگیے والے نوجوان نے ملامت کے لہجے میں گورے سارجنٹ سے کہا، صاحب بہادر تم نے ناحق میرا 5 روپے کا نقصان کر دیا، ورنہ 10 پھیرے پورے کر کے میں نے تو شرط جیت لی ہوتی۔ گورے سارجنٹ نے اس کی طرف قہر بھری نظروں سے دیکھا مگر مارے غصے کے اس کے منہ سے کوئی لفظ نہ نکل سکا۔ اس کے بعد وہ دونوں نوجوان جس انداز سے جھومتے جھامتے آئے تھے اسی انداز سے جھومتے جھامتے وہاں سے چلے گئے۔ ان کے جانے کے بعد وہ گورکھا سپاہی جو بندوق لیے پہرے پر کھڑا تھا آپ ہی آپ ہنس پڑا اور گورے سارجنٹ کی طرف دیکھ کر کہنے لگا شالا لوگ مشکری کرتا تھا. مگر گورے سارجنٹ کے ہونٹوں پر نہ تو مسکراہٹ نمودار ہوئی اور نہ اس نے گورکھے کی بات کا کوئی جواب دیا. اس کا چہرہ اور سرخ ہوتا جا رہا تھا.
کیا بات.
All right, I think we should open it up to the audience.
جیسا کہ ابھی نشاندہی کی گئی کہ پاکستانی state is not interested in highlighting Jallianwala Bagh. There is another incident which the state is actively interested in suppressing it, and that was the Babra massacre of 1948 near Charsadda. I don't think even educated people know about it. So how come even the unofficial historians are not mentioning this tragedy?
ہم سے سوال ہے.
Any of you, come on.
I mean, I can't speak for any historian, I suppose, other than myself, but I think it's pretty much in line with a politics of forgetting. I don't think it's that removed from it. Whether it's the Babra massacre, whether it's the Qissa Khani Bazaar massacre, وہ بھی ہوا تھا 1930-31 میں, یا جلیانوالہ باغ ہو, گلگت 87. یہ تو بالکل.
Lady in the front.
السلام علیکم. حارث صاحب نے مینشن کیا تھا اباؤٹ براؤن راج اینڈ ہاؤ دی انسٹیٹیوشنز ان پاکستان, اف یو ٹاکنگ اباؤٹ پاکستان, اسٹل آر ریفلیکٹنگ دی لیگسی آف دا لاجک آف پاور دیٹ the colonialism reflected. So my question is کہ جو subversion ہے and to the resistance to that colonial mindset, do you see that still happening in the same force, جس force سے وہ evolve کر رہی ہے in our state as well یا نہیں؟
میرا خیال ہے. You see, if you have to muffle voices so overtly and blatantly, اس کا مطلب ہے کہ نروسنس تو ہے نا, اور اگر نروسنس ہے تو اس کا مطلب ہے کوئی ریئل قسم کی ریزسٹنس ہے تو نروسنس ہے, which we don't find that often in places like Lahore and Islamabad, but otherwise بہت ریزسٹنس ہے. اب whether we have a nucleus, whether we have a political expression, that is I think that will evolve eventually. Because I'm an incorrigible optimist, so I see that human societies evolve and develop, and we all pass through these phases, different nations, different societies. تو ہے تو اگر نہ ہو تو پھر خوف کس بات کا ہے؟ پھر جس کی جو مرضی کہتا رہے, نہ روکیں کوئی پروگرام, نہ کسی کا انٹرویو چلنے سے روکیں, نہ کسی کا کالم چھپنے سے روکیں, نہ کسی کے, تو اس کا مطلب ہے خوف زدہ تو ہوتے ہیں نا. تو پاور کا اپنا ایک جو پورا ایک the logic of power, as Ali was saying, I think eventually it is not viable, it is not sustainable anymore. I mean, how does that transform into something better, and when it will transform, I don't know, but it will.
We have a question here.
My question is, what was the reaction of All India Muslim League about Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, and especially its prominent leaders like Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Liaquat Ali Khan? And second, what is the link of that Jallianwala Bagh tragedy with Khilafat movement? And secondly, Jallianwala Bagh tragedy like incidents are happening continuously in our country. How can we stop them, and what role we can play to stop these incidents, because still these type of incidents are happening in our state?
I think Qasmi Sahab for the first half of the question.
I think ظاہر ہے وہ جو بھی اس کی یونیورسل کنڈمنیشن تھی جو پولیٹیکل اس وقت کے وہ تھے, اس میں کم سے کم ہندوستان کے اندر, I mean, you do find people, a small group of people who were writing in support of the incident as to how, especially Anglo-Indian communities, how the incident has helped to secure lives. Early unionists, how it has helped to secure the Raj and lives of people and all of that. لیکن لیکن اس کے علاوہ میں اس میں زیادہ تفصیلی گفتگو ہو جائے گی کہ خلافت موومنٹ اور اس کے ساتھ کیا لنک ہے. اور دوسرا اس پر بھی کافی بات ہو چکی ہے کہ ریاست کو کس طرح چلایا جائے یا کیا اس کی بیسس کو کس طرح تبدیل کیا جائے کہ اس طرح کے واقعات دوبارہ تاکہ نہ ہو سکے.
قاسمی صاحب earlier when we were chatting آپ نے ایک واقعہ کا ذکر کیا تھا کہ اقبال نے
وہ ایک الگ بات ہے.
وہ ریئیکشن کا پوچھ رہا ہے
کہ one of the reasons why it's not possible to sort of have this kind of an anti-colonial politics being part of Pakistani state narrative, it's because people that we look up to, people like Sayyid Ahmad Khan, people like Iqbal or Jinnah, did not have this kind of an anti-imperialist bone in that way, right? So تو ان کا بہت سارا کام, ان کی شاعری, ان کے اسٹیٹمنٹس اس طرح کے ہیں کہ جس سے مختلف مواقع پر راج کو بہت تقویت ملی, right? So if this is the legacy that we want to own, تو اس میں پھر یہ narrative fit in نہیں ہوتا. اور اس کے برعکس وہ لوگ جو کہ اینٹی راج تھے وہ پھر اینٹی پاکستان بھی تھے for the same perhaps reason, but تو وہ ایک that's the reason why this kind of جو شیئرڈ لیگیسی کی جو بات کر رہے تھے حارث کے, اینٹی کلونیل ریزسٹنس از اے شیئرڈ لیگیسی. دیٹ از وائی اس کی سیلیبریشن پاکستان میں اس طرح سے ممکن نہیں ہے جس طرح سے ہندوستان میں کچھ عرصے تک ہوتی رہی ہے. عوامی نہیں ہو رہی.
Very quickly, you see, we are not even told that Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah made a speech in favor of Bhagat Singh and his comrades in 1929 in the Imperial Legislative Council. یہ بھی نہیں پڑھاتے ہیں, باقی چیزیں تو اپنی جگہ ہیں. He made a speech which was spread over 2 sessions in favor of Bhagat Singh and against, جس میں انہوں نے کہا تھا کہ وہ کوئی ordinary criminal نہیں ہے. So you can't treat these people like ordinary. So so that is also not told, that Quaid-e-Azam made a speech in favor of Bhagat Singh and his comrades.
My question is very simple. Yes, my question very simple. جو ڈسکشن یہاں پر ہوئی, قاسمی صاحب نے, حارث صاحب نے جو ڈیفائن کیا the mindset behind the Jallianwala Bagh, the psyche behind this, it was a colonial reflection, or it was due to the anti-colonial movement of the certain area where some colonial forces are ruling there. مگر ہم اگر تھوڑا سا آگے چلیں, 1955 1 دسمبر 1955 روزا پارک, منٹگمری, الاباما, جہاں پر اس نے ایک ریفیوز ٹو گیو اپ ہر سیٹ, مارٹن لوتھر کنگ کا پھر موومنٹ شروع ہوا, اور بلیکس کے لیے جو ہیومن رائٹس, بیسک رائٹس کی موومنٹ شروع ہوتی ہے 55 میں, اور اس کے بعد پھر مارٹن لوتھر نے اس میں اسٹرگل کیا, بلیکس کو رائٹس ملے. تو اگر ہم جلیانوالہ باغ کو تھوڑا سا لا کر فٹ ان کرتے ہیں 1955 سے 1968 تک جب مارٹن لوتھر کو اسسینیٹ کیا گیا, تو امریکہ میں کوئی کولونیل مائنڈ سیٹ نہیں تھا, وہاں پر ایک بیسک ہیومن رائٹ کا پرابلم تھا. اس سے اگر ہم آگے چلیں تو 1971 ایسٹ پاکستان, یس میں آ رہا ہوں, سوال پہ آ رہا ہوں. اس کے آگے ہم چلتے ہیں تو جو میسیکر 1919 میں جلیانوالہ باغ میں ہوا, وہ کچھ وقفے کے ساتھ ریپیٹ ہو رہا ہے. اور آج بھی ہم اگر کشمیر کو دیکھیں, یا اس سے پہلے بلوچستان کوئٹہ میں ہزارہ کمیونٹی کے خلاف کے حوالے سے جو بے شمار مرڈرز, 100 آف مرڈرز ہوئے, تو بنیادی طور پر میرا جو سوال ہے کہ اس قسم کے جو میسیکرز ہوتے ہیں, اس قسم کے جو ایونٹس جو سانحے ہوتے ہیں, اس کے پیچھے بیسک جو سائیکی ہے وہ ہیٹرڈ ہے یا خوف ہے؟
ایک آپ کا کافی آپ کا سوال جو ہے وہ اس گفتگو کو سمرائز بھی کرتا ہے جو یہاں ہوئی ہے. وہ سبجوگیشن ہے فار مٹیریل اینڈ ایک سائیکولوجیکل سبجوگیشن ہے جس کی بدترین شکل ہوتی ہے مار پیٹ کر کے, لوگوں کو خون خرابہ کر کے, جس کا نتیجہ جو ہے وہ معاشی مفادات ہوتے ہیں, مٹیریل انٹرسٹ ہوتے ہیں, جو کہ پاورز دیٹ بی حاصل کرتی ہیں.
We have a question here.
My question is about commemoration. What's the reason we are not really giving due importance to the commemoration of events like Jallianwala Bagh and other events, and particularly about the hasty transfer of power in 1947, which resulted in a very huge loss of life. So, in spite of the importance of all these events, they are, and moreover, we are not even demanding any apology from the British for these things. My concern is that at least we should demand an apology from the British rulers for such events.
Absolutely, sir. And I think
there is hardly any movement for that.
The discussion already addressed the earlier part of your question, but Ali Raza, perhaps the issue of reparations and apologies you could quickly take?
Sure. I think that reparations اور apology پہ میں ایک بات ابھی تھوڑی دیر میں کرتا ہوں, مگر I think that جو قاسمی نے کچھ عرصے پہلے بات کی تھی, اور میں اس کو تھوڑا سا اس کو اور ایلیبریٹ کرنا چاہوں گا. I think یہ بھی پوچھنا چاہیے کہ اگر commemoration, we shouldn't like ask for commemoration for the sake of commemorating like incidents. The question is what exactly is being remembered and how is it being remembered and what is the political function that memory is performing. So it's very easy, as happened across the world, where it's very easy to remember anti-colonialism as basically being a form of nationalist chauvinism. And I think اس میں تھوڑی سی باریکی لانی چاہیے کہ ایک آپ اینٹی کولونیلزم کے نعرے مارتے ہوئے ایسا نہ ہو کہ آپ بیسکلی کوئی مطلب کہ ہندوستانی قوم پرستی کو یا پاکستانی قوم پرستی کو اس طرح سے آپ جو ہیں اس کو پروان چڑھوائیں. تو یہ میرے خیال سے اس میں تھوڑی سی باریکی لانی پڑے گی. تو جلیانوالہ باغ وہ کیا وجوہات تھیں, کیوں پاکستان میں یاد نہیں کیا جاتا, وہ تو ہم نے میرے خیال سے بات کر ہی لی ہے. مگر اگر پاکستان میں اگر وہ یاد کیا بھی جاتا ہے تو بنیادی سوال میرا یہ ہوگا کس تناظر میں یاد کیا جا رہا ہے اور کیوں یاد کیا جا رہا ہے, اور خود وہ کام نہ کریں. یعنی کہ اس کو کمیموریٹ کرنے کا ایک فنکشن تو یہ بھی ہے نا, ٹو ایکنالج right that this is not exactly that this is not simply the past in some ways, that there is a legacy to contend with as well and a present to kind of like think about as well. تو اور یہی بات میں ریپریشنز اور اپالوجی کے تناظر میں بھی کروں گا. یہ بات کافی لمبی ہو جائے گی کہ اپالوجی کس سے مانگنی چاہیے, کس کو دینی چاہیے, اس میں کون کون ملوث تھا, کیا ان کو بھی اپالوجی دینی چاہیے جو ان کے جانشین ہیں, جو انہوں نے جلیانوالہ باغ کی ایک طرح سے انہوں نے سپورٹ کی تھی, اس طرح سے کولیبریٹ کیا تھا. تو یہ پیچیدہ ایک وہ تھوڑی سی گفتگو ہو جائے گی.
یہ گفتگو تو بہت لمبی کھینچ سکتی ہے. سو مائی heartfelt apologies to all of those who could not ask a question, but I would like to wrap it up by requesting Haris Sahab to recite the poem he wrote about Jallianwala.
یہ ایک بغیر اس کی کسی تمہید کے, کیونکہ وقت میرا خیال ہے ہمارا, میں دہراؤں گا بھی نہیں مصرے جو کہ شاعروں کو عادت ہوتی ہے. یہ اس نظم کو, یہ میرے پہلی دفعہ جب میں امرتسر گیا تھا تو میں کچھ نہیں لکھ سکا تھا, میں ایک پرسنل کنیکشن ہے ہمارا, اور اس کے بعد جب میں دوبارہ گیا ہوں تو اس کے بعد میں نے یہ نظم لکھی ہے لاہور میں اور کچھ اسلام آباد میں, امرتسر سے. اس کا عنوان ہے جلیانوالہ باغ سے واپسی پر. آپ میں سے کچھ دوستوں نے شاید سنی ہو پہلے. روز اول سے زمین اور آسمانوں میں ہے جاری زندگی اور موت کی یہ کشمکش. موت جب لائی صبا کے روبرو باد سموم, چاہتی تھی کونپلیں پھوٹیں نہ کلیاں کھل سکیں. زندگی گرجی چمک کر بادلوں میں آ گئی, ایسے برسی کھیت کھلیانوں چمن زاروں میں پھر ذوق نمو پیدا ہوا. منتشر ہو کر ہوئی تحلیل جب باد سموم, تب کفے افسوس ملتی موت پسپا ہو گئی. زندگی نے بادلوں سے طائروں کا رخ کیا, آسمانوں میں بھری تازہ اڑان, دیر تک گردش میں رہ کر جب ذرا تھک کر رکی मौत ने मौका गनीमत जानकर एक जस्त ली, चाहती थी ज़र्ब वो ऐसी लगाए जिंदगी उठने न पाए। लम्हा भर को जिंदगी सहमी सरासीमा हुई, लेकिन उसकी एक एक नस में वो पैहम इस्तराब, इस जहां में रंग भर देने की ख्वाहिश, फिक्र फन हुस्नो शबाब, एक झटके से वो उठी मौत को चित कर दिया। मौत संभली ताक में बैठी रही, उसने सोचा जिंदगी से दू बदू लड़ना कोई आसान नहीं, आशिकाने जिंदगी को घेरती हूं अब के बार, पैंतरा बदलूंगी कारी होगा उन पर मेरा वार। आशिकाने मौत ने शबखून मारा, आशिकाने जिंदगी के जिस्म खाकिस्तर हुए, इस जहां से जाते जाते आशिकाने जिंदगी ने मौत को झांसा दिया। इस जहां से जाते जाते आशिकाने जिंदगी ने मौत को झांसा दिया, जान दे दी दिल के शोले को बचा कर ले गए, जिंदगी को सुर्ख रुई ताबनाकी दे गए। रोज़े अव्वल से ज़मीन और आसमानों में है जारी जिंदगी और मौत की ये कशमकश, आज लेकिन इस जहाने रंग बू में आशिकाने ज़िंदगी की तरहदारी के तुफैल, जिंदगी के साए से लर्जा है मौत, जिंदगी के बख्त पर हैरान है मौत, जिंदगी आबाद है वीरा है मौत।
क्या बात,
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
बस इसी के साथ साथ आप सबका बहुत शुक्रिया। जो लोग सवाल नहीं पूछ पाए, मेरी माजरत। Thank you for being here.
Thank you to our lovely participants and the moderator. Thank you everyone.